Hi, and here we go on Lesson 3B. We're going to be talking about classes and objects. This is the heart of Java programming, and in fact programming in many languages called object-oriented languages. So let's see what we're talking about here. In every Java program, there's at least one thing that you are creating, or using, or modifying. Each of these things, along with their associated data and their behaviors, is called an object. And a class is a template, or you can think of it as a blueprint for implementing similar objects. The relationship between objects and classes: each object is called an instance of its class. So what does this mean? Well, we've seen this before. Remember this code from our very first lesson. We had scanner console equals new scanner system.in. That created a variable for us called console that was of type scanner. Then we could use the console later on. So we said string name equals console dot next line. Well, in this example, scanner is a class. It contains the blueprint for all the things that scanners can do. It has things like next line in it, that anybody that is created as a scanner has a function in it, a method called next line, that's going to read the next line of text. It's got quite a few other things in it, some of which you may have discovered in Lesson 1. So scanner is a class. Console is an object of type scanner. We instantiate console as an object by setting it equal to a new scanner and passing in some optional parameters. So if we just said scanner console semicolon, that would say, hey Java, I'm going to use a variable called console and I want it to be of type scanner. But it doesn't create the object yet. We have to say console equals a new scanner to say, all right, Java, figure out what's in that blueprint called scanner. How big is it? What data fields does it have? What needs to go into it? What sort of behaviors can anything that is of type scanner do? Go find all of that, set aside some memory for it, and refer to that memory by the name console. We access the behaviors of the scanner by then typing in the name of the object, followed by a dot, then the name of the behavior. It's like you get the attention of the object. Hey, you, console, do a next line for me. Hey, you, console, give me the next int. Hey, you, console, close yourself, and so on. That's going to be the behavior of any object. You create it as an instance of a class by using that new keyword, and then you invoke all its behaviors by putting its name, dot, and the behavior. So what goes into a class? Well, a class can contain data. This is optional, it doesn't have to. But data that's remembered for the lifetime of any object. These pieces of data are called instance variables or state variables. It's what makes an object a unique member of the class. And there's one or more constructors that get executed when an object is instantiated. That means whenever you do that new keyword, something from the class gets executed to say, here's how I create a new one of you. It gets the object set up to be able to work properly. And then one or more methods, like that next line that we saw in the scanner class. These are routines that can be executed by an object. A set of Java code that gets executed when it's invoked by name. So here's an example. Suppose we want to write a Java program that could be used to track GOA students and their registrations in various courses. We might have a class called student. We design the class to have the data and the constructors and the methods that make sense for us. So this might be our design of the student class. We might have instance variables, state variables of name and email address and list of courses. So if I create a student, each student has a name, an email address, a list of courses that might be different than the next student that I create. Constructors would be what gets executed when I do the new keyword. And maybe I have a constructor where you pass in the name, the email address, and the list of courses. And then methods, things that you can do once you've created a new student. Maybe it's update name. Maybe it's get their name so you can use it in another program. Maybe it's update their email address or get their email address or enroll them in a class or withdraw from a class. I'm sure you can think of others. So if you watch the next video, we're going to go into Eclipse and implement this student class with just a few things to give you an idea of how you build a class and what goes into it and how you use it. Here's the basic syntax of the class. It starts with public class, name of class. So public class student, or public class scanner, or public class bank account. And then an open brace, and eventually a closing brace, which you can't actually see on this page because it's scrolled way down into the bottom where I've got the little footer on this page. But public class, name of class, and then an open and closing brace. Within the class, you put in all the pieces. If you want to declare any variables, you do them up front, private string name, private int num courses. That says, here I've got a variable called name. Every object that you create of this class, name of class, is going to have its own name that's separate from every other object's name. And it's going to have its own integer number of courses that's separate from every other integer's number of courses. Then there would be constructors, public, name of class. Notice that's the exact same name that you gave the class. A constructor has the exact same name as the class, and then if you're passing any parameters, you put it in there. Then methods. These are things that you want your object to be able to do. Hey, object, get me your name. That means I have to have a method called getName. Maybe this one returns a string variable. Maybe there's another one called updateName. It returns void, returns nothing to me, but you pass it in a new name. Now, we're going to play around in Eclipse so you get an idea of what to do with these, and the later videos are going to go into much more detail on methods and constructors and the various instance variables or state variables. Now, it's probably important to understand what's really happening in the computer to get an idea of what an object is as opposed to what a class is and what your variables are. So here's what happens. Suppose you say student S1. Student is the name of a class. S1 is a variable that maybe in our main method we've decided to create a variable that we're going to call S1 that's of type student. When we do this, Java sets aside a little bit of memory that it's going to refer to by the name S1. And it knows S1, whenever you refer to this memory, it has all of the characteristics of something called a student. Then when you say S1 equals new student, maybe passing in the name and the email address and a course that that student is taking, Jane Doe at aaa.a.com, Intro to Programming. What happens when you do that new? New says, create me an object. So now Java says, I'm going to find some memory, enough memory for however big objects of that class student are. And I'm going to put in it Jane Doe and the email address and the list of courses and whatever else that class says that every object of that type has to have. So you've got S1 in the computer that just says, here's my variable, it's going to be of type student, and somewhere else it said, here is enough room to fit an object that looks like a student. And then Java hooks them up. It puts a pointer to the memory of where that object is, and that's what gets stored in that little bit of memory for S1. It's just an address to where the real data is stored. So that's a real quick introduction to the concept of classes and objects. The next thing you should do is look at the video that comes right after this one that shows manipulating classes and objects in Eclipse to get more of an intuitive feel for it. Then move on to the next blocks in the lesson, and then we'll go back and hit some of these topics in more detail. Happy viewing.